Hi, this is Laura Kuhl.
And Adrienne Best.
And decided that we would do a podcast today, kind of keep it a little bit lighter because sometimes we do videos too, but with this, we thought, well, it's really more of an experience of your inner mind. We're going to talk to Adrienne today about her near death experience and what she experienced going through lymphoma, correct?
Lymphoma,
Lymphoma.
a stem cell, which is essentially a bone marrow transplant. And I had lymphoma for the second time and went through this incredibly long, arduous process that had some complications in the middle, which resulted in me having a near-death experience that was extremely powerful and extremely helpful in my journey to understand my purpose.
Yeah. So I met Adrienne probably about 2 or 3 years prior to her getting very sick. And I will say she's always been very open, but I never got the sense that she had gifts per se. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like it was kind of you were open to what we were talking about. You had children that were crystalline, although we didn't understand that at the time. Yeah. Then she came back to me after. Well, actually, I put out this thing in to clear people's houses, and her house came up, and I was like, "Holy crap! You have 20 portals open. You need help." And so, in working with her with the deep clearing protocol, that's when we figured out how incredibly gifted she was. So here she had this near death experience, opened her up psychically, apparently, because now she's unstoppable, doing readings for people as well. And yeah, super cool. So you want to tell the people like what happened?
Yeah, so at the start of this process, I was getting treatment, chemotherapy, and I had a procedure done that essentially is called a lung biopsy, that they take a piece of your tissue from your lung out, and it was basically done incorrectly. So they punctured a hole through my lung, and I knew something was wrong because the excruciating pain was more than I should have had because I was on a lot of medication to not feel anything. So I witnessed everything. I knew something was wrong. And I got home and I was sent home
You
early.
went home?
I was sent home early,
oh my gosh.
Unfortunately.
Right.
And after about 20 phone calls of me begging and saying, look, you don't understand, something's seriously wrong because I can't stand up straight and I can't breathe. So I got back, I went back the next morning to the ER and they took me back in and reevaluated. And they're like, oh yeah, I guess you have a hole there, very nonchalantly. And I basically just said, you're not going to send me home until this gets resolved. And I stayed, I think this stay in particular was about 2 weeks where I was put, I had some tubing and some corrective repair and a lot of x-rays and things because it was just during chemotherapy, it can be very dangerous to have a hole there in your lung that is already being treated for lymphoma. So I went through a lot of pain. I had a morphine pump. And I remember being in my room, and the nurses were.
No, this was in the hospital.
This is at UW
room.
Hospital. Yep. This is at UW Hospital where a lot of my treatment already was and where the transplant ended up actually being held. But this is before the transplant even happened. So this is probably about 4 months before the transplant occurred. And so I was just admitted for at least a week
hole
and
in
a half,
your lung?
2 weeks for a hole in my lung.
Oh my God, that they put there.
That they put there.
And you had cancer.
And I had cancer, and they didn't want to really believe that it was their fault, but that's a whole nother discussion. So I had to get to the point where I was just on a lot of medication, just trying to be keeping comfortable because I remember not being able to sit up straight to even sit up in bed because the pain was so intense.
Oh my god.
And there's a tube that went all the way from my left lung all the way, and it would drag onto the floor into this oxygen tank, and it was crazy. And I remember laying there and having 2 or 3 nurses coming in consistently every few hours to do
Which
vitals,
is so healing.
which is not healing, I can tell you from way too many
Yes.
experiences that
How,
this is
like,
not normal.
How can you not say that, like, or tell people that to, like, wake them up when sleep is so direly important for
every time
for
I complained.
healing?
Yeah. They're like, well, just go back to sleep now. I'm like, can't do that because there's like a
Yeah.
gajillion machines in here that make noise.
And I have cancer,
And
I don't
and the
feel
pain.
good, and I want to kick you in the coochie and
Yeah,
make
so I
you
got
scream.
I had my
Okay.
moments of getting super angry at a
Okay.
lot of the people because it was warranted.
Amen. Right.
But this whole time frame of being in this bed, and this is after another type of X-ray that day. I remember being wheeled back into my normal room and laying there, and there was like 2 other nurses that came and did a couple vitals, and the person that was in charge of my care there was extremely negative. I remember his energy just being super. He had a lot of anger and just didn't care, complete lack of compassion. He didn't hear me at all when I asked him something or needed something. It was just more like he wanted to check off the things on his list and be on his way. So I figured I wasn't even going to complain to him anymore. He came in and did like a 2-second look up and down at me and wrote something down on a paper and left. And I remember being alone. But then this overwhelming sense of pain, I can't describe, because I mean, I've had 3 children. I've gone through childbirth. This was nothing like that. It was extreme. Your whole body.
I have chills.
It's just,
I
it's
have
hard.
chills. I am so sorry.
It's hard because it was so painful. And I kept going with my morphine button. Like, how much more could I do without like killing myself with morphine? And I remember just nothing worked. And it was like 20 minutes. And I remember just laying there. And after you get to a point of this wave of pain, where it just went through your body. And then I realized I wasn't looking up at the ceiling anymore. I was looking down at my body. It was that fast. I just felt this overwhelming sense of peace and just was looking at my body. And I remember thinking, oh, that looks really sad. That she looks uncomfortable. But look, there's this light over here. And I just got completely distracted. I was like, oh, there's this really cool light. And I remember seeing a lot of my family who's passed, and particularly my uncle who has passed from cancer of the lung. And he just took me by the hand and he's like, hey, come on, I want to show you something. And we went through the tunnel, and I just remember this absolute wrapping of love.
Full body chills right now.
It felt so good. I remember feeling like I just want to feel this forever. Like, I don't want to go back, because I had no association to my body. I wasn't thinking about my kids. I wasn't thinking about my life. I wasn't thinking about my husband or anything. I just you lose like your memory and your feeling of what it even is to have a life. You're like, oh, that's cool. That served me, but now I'm going over here. Like, you just don't. It's a complete cutoff, which was weird. But it was the brightest light I've ever seen without blinding you. You could look straight at it and be enveloped with this love.
Wow.
And just be not, and I could think about it and I would move. I didn't have to do anything except think, and I was moving. And he said, well, I want to show you something. And now that I've done some of my own research, I'm pretty sure this was me having a life review, which I've heard other people talk about. And it was basically showing me what I was going to do in my future. And granted, I didn't know anything about anything at that point.
They showed you
They showed me all of this. Yes.
So they knew you was coming back.
This was like, and this is why I think they showed me, because they were like, so, because I remember at the end, my uncle was like, you can't come with me. You have to go back. And it was, so I'll do the life review, because that was really interesting.
You're like, can we get rid of that nurse first?
It was so weird, because I didn't remember what had happened to me at death or why I was even there. I just remember going, it's kind of like if you just walked back into your house after being on vacation. Like,
Sure.
like just being
Or
home.
or moving from your steak to the cheesecake and not really caring about the steak anymore.
Yes, exactly.
Now it's the cheesecake.
Yep. Because I just remember thinking, okay, let's just go over here. And so he showed me.
Yeah.
I remember the biggest memory of that was my children, and all of them were older. And I remember seeing my oldest in what kind of job he was going to have, what he was going to do for a living.
Are you going to share that with us so we can come back
so
and
he
go,
was going to be
liar, liar, pants up.
Yeah. So he was shown as
Okay.
a successful businessman.
Okay.
And then I
That
was
totally
shown,
makes
and that was
sense.
just him. And then the rest of them, there was this beautiful, how do you describe it? Like a really big house on my left and the water to my right. And I remember thinking, this just looks really familiar. And there was all of my kids and my husband, and we were older, but we were all just walking along and enjoying our time together. And I remember just thinking, this is so great. And then it was kind of this, you kind of jumped from these scenes because you would see it and then you would go to the next one. It was
Sure.
like watching a movie. And then I went to this part of my life where I had this desk, and then people were sitting across from me, and I was like, what am I doing? And he's like, well, you're basically going to be doing, this working with other people. And I didn't understand what that meant at the time, but they didn't
Sure.
get into it, but it was what I'm doing now.
Right.
And it was like a private desk and like this little office area. And I was like, this is so weird. Like, I don't work right now. Like, what would this be? And I didn't have time. Like, anytime you were thinking a question, if the review wasn't done, it was like you weren't supposed to know, because I could tell I wasn't getting answers back from that. It's like,
so wait
I wasn't
a minute.
ready.
So you were in the middle of this review, and yet they went farther out
Yes.
with the review?
Mm-hmm. But I found out later, as I was going through it, and towards the end of the
Mhm.
review, that the reason they showed me the stuff in the future was to show me the stuff
Why you
I
had
was
to go
going,
back.
why I had to go back. Yes,
Oh,
exactly.
Okay.
I did at one point towards the end see outside of my hospital room and like the people around outside and what they were doing.
Yeah.
And when I brought that up later, I wasn't able to confirm with anybody because I didn't know the names of the nurses or anything, so I couldn't confirm any of that, but I was able to see from a bird's eye view outside of the hospital and outside the room.
Sure.
And then
I do that.
just said,
I do that now. Do you have?
Yeah.
Do you have that gift now? Because I can.
Remote viewing?
viewing?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I do
Yeah.
it with people on the phone sometimes for readings, and I'll be describing where they live, like
Yeah.
in detail. Yeah.
Yeah, I did
So
that
it's like
yesterday.
that, and I didn't know I could do that at the time. So
Yeah.
for me, it was weird. But this is just part of being in that place vibrationally, where if you're not in your body, that's what you're doing, is
Right.
looking at everything from a bird's eye view.
Right.
And I thought, okay, and I just kept saying like, okay, where do we go? Like, it was exciting. I was like, where do we go next? And he stopped and turned around. I just remember this so clearly. He took my hands and he looked right at me. He's like, I'm sorry, but you can't stay. Like, you have a much bigger purpose than you understand right now. You have to go back. It's not your time. And I remember seeing like a bunch of my other family and other people that I recognized, but I still don't know who they are. I just know that I knew them.
Sure.
And it was this kind of half circle. And I looked back, and then they're like, I'm sorry, you have to go now. And then it was just like,
Okay, now
back
tell
in
me
your
something.
body.
Did you get anything about like details about how the Earth was going to be?
No, I did not get any of that. Mm-mm.
Interesting.
It was just purely my own life.
But we knew that your like son was there and your
Mhm.
daughter was there, and they were older, in their
Mhm.
20s or 30s.
Yep.
Well, then we know the world ain't ending anytime soon.
Yeah, that was interesting to me because I've thought about that recently. I'm like, so if my kids are older and I'm older,
Mm-hmm.
then I kind of have a frame of reference, and things would be
Yeah.
at least at that point. So,
Right.
but
So
then
there's
the
no
pain started
nuclear
back.
war,
Not that I was seeing, no.
or if you
I
did,
didn't
it
see
didn't
anything.
affect you.
Yeah, and I didn't feel anything but peace and love, and just the colors and the vividness, and there's no words in the human language
Yeah.
to comprehend
But
what it
now-
feels like.
But now, because like you and I both work with people who have crossed over, like
Yeah.
mediumship, right? So when
Mhm.
they come to us, they, first of all, they don't care about how they died.
No.
right? Am I
No,
right?
you're totally right.
Like, you don't care. And
No.
you try and tell these people who are like just devastated. They've lost their
Right.
mom or their best friend or their lover or whatever. And they're like, oh, I want to know exactly what happened when they died. And I'm
Yeah.
like, they just don't care.
They don't care. There's
Right.
no association. And
Right.
most of the time, at least in my experience with clients, is the person that has passed really wasn't even in their body to experience the pain or anything. They're not there. Like, they're taken out of their body before any of that occurs.
Right. Right. Now, was this the uncle that from the aunt that would come see me too? So
Yep.
this is interesting. So her aunt, this uncle, came to see me first and then told Adrienne about me. And then Adrienne came to see me. Isn't that interesting? And then
weird.
After that, then she died and her uncle. So I've had like interactions with this uncle for a really long time. And yeah,
Yep.
I totally see it.
It's cool.
And he's like, yeah, we've had lots of discussions about this. This is interesting. Very interesting. So when you came back into your body and you re-entered, were you better? Like, did you feel better, or was it just like...
I mentally was in shock, and for a while I still didn't feel pain because it was like an adjustment period. Okay. Where I was kind of like, I hovered over myself for a while, and I was like...
They're telling me I gotta go back.
I could just run back to the light. But I mean, it happened. It's kind of this... It's a force field that you have no control over. And then once the pain came back, I just remember sobbing and going, but why, God? Why did I have to come back? Because it was just this realization of how much pain was coming too. And I remember him telling me, but it's okay because you will get through this. Even though the pain is there, remember what that felt of God's love surrounding you. And it was I just remember just going, but...
Do you remember the pain?
Yes, I do. I do.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I do remember because the pain lasted for, especially this last time. My kids remember the pain because I would sit there and just cry and cry and cry and like do whatever I could do to distract myself away from the pain because there was at one point no medication that they could give me to stop the pain because it was so intense. And that I went back to that moment though several times and thought, okay, well, I'll just remember how God was just holding me. And that helped immensely during the time period during transplant where you're in a room, very small room, isolated for a month and a half by yourself.
So you would reenact or relive this near-death experience over and over and over.
It was a peaceful thing that I would do.
Sure. In
a prayerful kind of way to get me through the pain.
So, okay, so like for me too, I've never had an NDA ever, but I love God so much, and I've known since I was very, very little. Yeah, it kind of takes my breath away about how much I love God and Jesus Christ, like all of that. And so when people, question me about my psychic abilities or whatever, I'm like, I have a deep, deep, deep faith in God and Jesus Christ. And I don't feel like most Christians or most people understand your and my connection to God.
I totally agree with that.
Right. And like I read the Bible and I question it and I've asked God, I've had conversations with God. And God has always like told me a long time ago everything is upside down and backwards. So if they were showing you from heaven that you were going to be doing this work, right?
Yep.
Then this is heaven sent. That's what I'm saying. Like,
yep.
I know what the Bible says, and it's so, like cautionary, which I do. I get that because I've met some charlatans before that obviously don't have the gift, and they're just messing with people, and you have to be careful, right?
Absolutely.
But that's like anything in life, to be honest.
Yeah.
I honestly believe 100% that this is and it wasn't that this is God sent, and it wasn't always this clear and this beautiful because, like anything, you have to go through testing with God,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
So when I went through what they call the dark night of the soul, or what I call like the great test from God, where I went from talking to angels and guides to talking to God. And I mean,
Yeah.
it was a clear step up because all of a sudden the guides and the angels didn't, it's not like they didn't exist, like they don't exist anymore or they don't matter, because they do.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different experience to go directly to God.
Totally.
And
It's a totally different thing.
and like you went directly to God.
Mm-hmm.
So you got the opening. Like
Yeah.
you didn't have to go through what I had to go through.
No.
But you had to go through what
A
you had to
different,
go
a different
through,
type.
which was, I mean, it was painful
Mm-hmm.
going through what I went through, but I couldn't imagine that. I'm not good with pain though. I would have died
Yeah.
and I would have been like, you can't make me go back. You can't make me go back. I'd be like, no,
Yeah,
no.
that was hard because I kind of went through a depression type
Oh,
period too, where you
yeah.
just kind of be like, but
I've heard of this before.
I have too. After I researched it, I was like, this is what a lot of people feel like after they come back, because you kind of go, you understand that you were told certain things, and if you have a purpose and everything, but you start going, but why couldn't I
Right.
do that over there where
Right.
it's no pain? But there was, he kept reiterating too, even afterwards, that all the things leading up to the cancer too were very important for me to go through, and they were essential in my journey of um, getting to this spot of understanding and being able to communicate with God and having that clarity. There was all of those things increased my perception of life and everything in it, and my purpose and how it fits into that puzzle.
And how you're fulfilling it.
Yeah. And now I see
Wow.
it really clearly now that I'm on the other side of that process. I'm like, I say this a lot. I would never change those experiences ever.
Right.
I don't,
right.
I don't,
No.
regret it because
No.
it changed me in such a way that I would never be able to be the same person. And that's a great thing.
Right. Now I've listened to some near death experiences just recently, and I called them out. I'm like, A, there's way too many detail. You're way too detailed in it. And I couldn't, like, I didn't get any body chills like I do with you. Some of them, like, I'm like, wow, I can see.
Yeah.
Like what they're doing. I couldn't see it with him. And I was like,
some of them
are. I call BS. And the guy that actually did the near death experience, like, interview, like I'm interviewing you.
Oh, yeah.
He liked my comment, like loved it on YouTube, and was like, I think he knew too, because I was like,
funny.
Yeah, this guy just wants attention. Because I was like, he was saying stuff, and I was like, whatever, predicting like nuclear, whatever, blah blah.
Yeah,
blah. I don't.
and I never got that from any of it.
I think that's just the fear that's going on so strong in our environment right now, in our world. Because the world that we live in, because we meditate, we pray every morning together. Adrienne and I do with a group of others. And if you're ever interested in doing that, please just get a hold of us, because you're more than welcome to do that with us. There's some things that you got to do first, but like do the deep clearing protocol yourself, but that's whatever. Anyways, because this is what we do, right? We get together, we do the deep clearing protocol in the morning, then we pray and we meditate, and we sit in love for minutes on end. And learning how to sit in love, right?
So important.
And this was like directed by God for us to learn how to live in love. And so our world and the way that we show up is like so much love, and we don't have that negative feeling about like whatever.
We're
is
not
going on.
absorbing those things that are constantly being bombarded on your phone or the news or the TV.
Right.
We're not
Right.
even feeling that when you sit in God's love and you can experience that on another level as a state of being and not just something that you're showing others once in a while. It's a completely different way of living, and it's a completely blissful way of living.
Right. Right.
If
Exactly.
I had to describe it, it's definitely.
So we were also told by God to create heaven on earth, which is creating your own heaven in your own home and getting your energy up to a level of by sitting in love, by thinking good thoughts, and by understanding God's love. Really? Really? Don't you think it would be an understanding of God's love?
Oh, totally. Because it's such a different experience to have God's love as opposed to maybe your spouse or somebody else that you love in your life. That's really you feel it in your body and your whole being so differently than just somebody giving it to you.
You know how sometimes, like when you were a teenager and you'd be listening to songs on the radio, right?
Yeah.
It was always, I always had this like guy in mind, or like, or a future love or whatever. Now, all of those love songs are to God. So we're like, I just love him so much.
It's true.
I was listening to somebody singing last night who was, I don't even know how it got on to my phone, but his name is Matthew, and I'll link it up to this because he opened my heart so much with his voice. Like when you sent me Amazing Grace, because Adrienne has the most beautiful voice too, and we'll sometime we're gonna have her do some singing.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, but this guy is just like, my heart just blew open. Like you could feel the love that he has too, right? Then you know those people are genuine.
Right.
Genuine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a completely different level of anything that is anything else in the world right now. It's just not in the realm of normal.
Right. So interesting. What keeps beeping too? Do you hear that?
I don't know what
I've never heard that on my computer before, which is so strange. Do you think we're just getting like confirmation from God? Like, hey, this is good.
This is good info. Keep that up.
So we actually got together today to put a greenhouse together because we're going to be doing YouTube videos of growing plants with her crystalline children. We're going to interview her crystalline children. We have videos on YouTube. We have this podcast. We are going to be doing lots of different things. And so you can go to www.laurakuhl.com, or you can go to
bestreflectionsmedium.com.
And that is where Adrienne and I are. And if you want a reading, or if you just want to listen to our podcasts or our meditations, or we're just going to be doing so much. So we thought we'd start with this NDA because this is how Adrienne got started. I got started, I was just born with it, right? Like I got the kick in the pants.
I mean, I knew that I had something different about me from a very young age, but I couldn't, until that experience, I wasn't fully expanding into it.
No.
Or understanding of it at all.
Right. You almost had to have that like lightning bolt experience.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a total catalyst for me.
Everybody has a different way or a different timing of it. Yeah. So, but hey, I'm super excited. Thank you for sharing your near-death experience with us.
Absolutely.
And I look forward to hanging out with you more.
Yes, absolutely.
Not that we don't hang out, like we meditate all the time together, but like hanging out, doing a lot of different projects. And she's got fruit trees, so we're going to be looking at that and this fall, helping them pick and all that jazz. And and if you guys have any questions or ideas that you want to throw at us, go ahead and shoot us an email from our websites. But yeah, it's been a awesome time, Adrienne.
Sounds wonderful.
All right. Talk to you later.
See ya.
Bye.